Everyone has a hot take about Family Guy, even people who don't watch the show. But for this video, we looked to the experts. You. We asked y'all what your Family Guy hot takes were, and today we're gonna break them down, discuss, and try to reckon with some of the spiciest takes the fandom has to offer. Xavier Alba 8105 says Quagmire should have his own spin-off. It insists upon itself. So this has been thrown around for years, dating all the way back to when the Cleveland show was announced. We think a lot of people were surprised that someone like Cleveland got a spin-off over Quagmire, who has arguably been a much more popular character for years. While we do think Quagmire would make for a decent spin-off, there are a couple of reasons why we don't know if it'll happen.
Have fun with your stupid giant chicken jokes and your Conway Twitter. Hey, why is there a moving truck outside Cleveland's house?
For one, the characterization of Quagmire has changed a ton over the years. Once defined by his tendency for womanizing practically on a criminal level, Quagmire's seedier habits have been drastically rolled back over the years. Nowadays, the writing team kinda seems a little torn on where to take this character, even referencing it briefly on the episode Pete Terminator. With how much sensibilities have changed over the years, we don't know if they could do a show that completely revolves around the characterization of Quagmire that made him so iconic.
Maybe I'll bump into her in 18 years.
What?
Did you really think I was gonna change that much?
Despite this, we think Quagmire still brings a much welcomed energy to Family Guy that would be sorely missed if he were written out. Let's be honest, Cleveland was kind of a blank slate character to choose for a spin-off. While that might not sound like a good idea, it did leave a lot of room to expand upon him and tweak him to be the lead of a show. Because of Quagmire's more eccentric personality traits, he might honestly just be better off as a side character.
We did about the same as Bob's Burgers.
That's your bar? Oh, shame on you.
That said, we think there's still something that could be done with the Quagmire-led show. The fact that he's a pilot means you could have a show revolving around him traveling the world, getting into all sorts of shenanigans across multiple cultures. It could be framed in a similar vein as the upcoming Stewie show, where his adventures are happening in-universe for Family Guy, which means you wouldn't have to write him out of the show. We think his character would need to be tweaked a bit to not make him one note, but a Quagmire spinoff certainly isn't the worst idea in the world.
Whoa, how'd you all get in my house? The implication being that I've had so much to drink, I don't know where I am.
Robert Discorda says Consuela deserves more screen time. She is the best character. A bit split down the middle on this one. On one hand, Consuela can be a pretty entertaining character. There's a simplicity to her that can be fun in certain instances. She definitely works best with brief jokes about her accent, her stoic, unshakable drive not to listen, and her tendency to shut down anything she doesn't want to do with a simple, no.
No, I have no money.
On the other hand, she is a bit one note, so we're not super sure how much more you could use her without the shtick getting a little dry after a while. Because of that one-noted nature, it might be a little difficult to find a good way to integrate her into bigger roles and episodes. We have seen this play out in episodes like Stewie Goes for a Drive and Dearly Deported, but what more is there really to do with her? Truth be told, we were kind of surprised to see her get more screen time over the years, considering how the show seemed to be rolling back racial stereotypes, especially ones voiced by someone other than their race. I guess Mike Henry already walked away from one character, and if he keeps up that trend, he's not going to have much left to work with.
For quinceañera, big party, many peoples.
Oh my god.
But maybe bigger roles for Consuela could work. We think having her as a character who's constantly unbothered but is capable of wild things could be an interesting direction. Think Natalia from Nanny Goats, someone who's stoic and without much emotion, but isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. That could be a fun direction to go in, but we also wonder what the shelf life of a character like that could be. We do think she's best utilized in small doses, so I'd have to say that maybe she's being used the right amount she should be right now.
Oh, no.
Rocks and Roll says that Cleveland and Donna's kids are criminally underused. Yeah, this has always been a really confusing one. Ever since the Browns moved to Spooner Street, Cleveland Jr., Roberta, and Rollo have been mostly seen and rarely heard. Heck, Roberta hasn't said a single line since debuting on the show. Do they hate her or something? Sometimes the show can feel like it's really spinning its wheels, retreading over the same character dynamics without really giving us something all that new. Utilizing those three could do a lot to help freshen up the show with new interactions and relationships to spin off from.
Sup, man?
Yeah, sup. Keep walking, you boondocks ripoff.
The pairing of Stewie and Rollo does feel like the most obvious one. Both are similarly designed characters, but they're different enough that you could create an interesting relationship that bounces off the two of them. While Stewie is more mature and snobbish, Rollo's more down-to-earth and probably has a better grasp on what it means to be a kid than Stewie does. Rollo could help Stewie to act his age more, while Stewie could have a new friend to rope into wild and crazy adventures across space and time. Or you could even set them up to be rivals, as their differing outlooks on life and the world could lead to some more conflicts. Honestly, ever since Doug died, Stewie's been needing a new foil to drive him forward.
You ever feel the cool steel of a switchblade pressed against your temple?
Chris and Cleveland Jr. definitely seem like they'd be two peas in a pod, but maybe that's why the show has hesitated on doing more with Junior. Two tubby, awkward teens with a bit of a dark side might not generate enough interesting interactions to validate them becoming friends. They aren't exactly the same, but we don't know if they're different enough to warrant putting them in some episodes together. Even still, let Cleveland Jr. appear during school scenes, or something at least. Try to convince me that Cleveland doesn't just keep all of his kids locked in a box down in the basement.
Bubble Roberta, you get back here.
There's no age of consent in the bubble.
But the pairing of Meg and Roberta honestly sounds like it could be the most interesting because of how different the two of them are. Roberta could very easily work her way into the popular crowd at school and could experience some conflict with how she should treat Meg. Outside of school, they're friendly because their dads are friends, but at school, Roberta has to wrestle with keeping up with appearances, and that means not interacting with Meg. It would do a lot for her character to see her in a role like this. To be honest, her even just saying a word would do wonders for her character. Unless they want to make this Family Guy's first mute character, then go for it, I guess?
Well, we'll all have to do our part. I'll take little cocoa butter here.
In conclusion, Rocks and Rolls, this is a great take. They should be used more. They're already built into the universe, so you wouldn't have to come up with more one-off characters all the time. And it's not like most of the voice actors don't already voice other characters on the show, so why shouldn't they get upgraded to more regular roles? A lot of you guys suggested Rollo should appear in Stewie's new show, and honestly, that'd be a great place to start expanding on these characters. Cloudsnap says Brian is a better dad to Stewie than Peter ever has been, to which Harry Does Stuff YT14 says, for real. We think we mostly agree with this one. Brian definitely has a much stronger relationship with Stewie than Peter does. We're honestly not entirely convinced that Peter even remembers Stewie exists half the time. When was the last time those two really hung out? In fact, if Lois isn't around to look after Stewie, the duty usually seems to fall onto Brian in most cases. Stewie probably even prefers that. After all, Brian is fairly willing to go along with whatever activities or adventures Stewie gets himself into, and while Brian does technically hold some type of authority over Stewie, it's never usually in a way that oppresses or restrains him, as Peter's role would entail. Oh, and being able to be understood by Brian probably helps too. Plus, Stewie and Brian are just friends who enjoy each other's company, so it makes sense why Stewie would probably prefer Brian as a paternal figure.
Care a great deal about you. A very great deal.
That being said, there is a saying about how the ones raising you need to be your parent first and your friend second. There's an argument to be made that Brian is too passive with Stewie, which allows the baby to get into all sorts of trouble, both on the playground level and multiversal level. Although it's not like Peter would probably be any better. He might actually make things worse, which, you know, might actually help to rein Stewie in. And they say being a bad parent isn't good parenting, but if we're talking explicitly about learning the nuances of life and growing up in the world, we'd have to agree that Brian is 100% a better parent to Stewie than Peter is. Not a very hard hurdle to jump over, mind you. I don't even think Peter could get himself over a hurdle.
This is the closest I've ever been to Mr. Quagmire. He's wearing makeup.
A bunch of y'all said that Meg is the most entertaining member of the Griffin family. We've been seeing a lot of love for Meg in these comments, and we honestly agree. Meg's really come a long way from being the family's punching bag. She still is that, mind you, but at least it's become a little less depressing. About time she stopped making us sad with all her sadness. But for real, it's definitely understandable why Meg now has so many fans. From a pure character point of view, she's one of the least problematic members of the family. A feat akin to Sisyphus rolling that big rock up a hill. Most of the time she's just keeping a low profile, going about doing her own thing with or without the backing of her family. Sure, sometimes it leads to trouble or misadventure, but rarely is it ever putting any of her family into harm's way. It honestly kind of feels like the family may fear her a little bit nowadays. As they should. The girl's been through enough that she's probably earned herself a little retribution.
I can do stuff. I can be a part of a comedy team.
And Meg's become a real underdog character, having shown the capability of doing great things like being an Olympian or a star basketball player if given the chance to. It's honestly such a fresh direction to take her in, giving her something to work for that pulls her out of her dark little life. Oh, and she's also a certifiable weirdo, which is a plus, believe it or not. Somehow the show found a way to make her kind of off-putting but still likable. Maybe it's because she's had so much pushback over the years that we managed to have a little more sympathy and understanding for her weirdness. So go ahead and keep guzzling those mustard packets, girl. You've earned it.
I got my mind on my mustard and my mustard on my mind.
May have to disagree on Con Airus being the best episode, though. True, it is very funny that we got tricked into watching a Meg episode, but let's not forget that the rest of the episode revolves around a very long name gag and Peter and Chris fighting for the affection of Herbert. There's a reason the show used to joke about Meg episodes being bad, and even though she only appears at the end, this unfortunately might have been one of the times where the show was right.
Oh, thank God! I thought it was going to be a Meg episode all throughout.
Sewer Drain Spider said that Seahorse Seashell Party could have been the best episode without the status quo. Big fat agree on this one, though we can't really say we were surprised by that ending. If you're unfamiliar, the episode revolves around Meg finally standing up for herself, clapping back at everyone in the family who's wronged her over the years. These callouts make the entire family turn on one another and implode, but the episode ends with Meg essentially walking all of her concerns back in order to keep the family together, united by their bullying of Meg. It's a great, cathartic episode that completely gets the wind knocked out of it with that ending. But the show always has to bend a knee to what's referred to as the status quo. Basically, if there's an episode about Peter getting a new red shirt, rest assured you will never see that thing again after that episode. The show always needs to reset back to the ground floor to keep up with continuity. Well, unless you're Meg, apparently. Remember that one time an episode ended with her fading out of existence?
Ah! What's happening?
Don't look at her. Don't look at her. It's okay. Just go with it. It'll all be over in a second.
So if they could completely erase Meg from the universe, why couldn't they have just let her have this? As we said before, Meg has undergone a much-needed character overhaul that's given her more things to do and more agency over her situation. An episode like this could have been the catalyst that kickstarted that evolution for Meg's character, but instead the show thought it'd be better to end with nobody learning a lesson, and I guess we were all just supposed to find that funny. And don't give us any of that noble sacrifice crap. There's nothing really noble about it, it's just a cop-out. Sorry, this episode gets me heated. It's not the funniest episode, but it does serve as a pretty important character moment for Meg, and the show 100% could have given her a bit of a win by ending it in a way that isn't so frustrating.
You're a
Yes. Yes, I am.
Birdbrain1999 says that Family Guy needs to shake up the status quo. Piggybacking off of what we just talked about, a lot of people have made mention of Family Guy moving forward in time in order to shake things up. We know most animated shows exist in a timeless void where the world only progresses as much as the creators need it to, which means Peter can still be born in the 60s and not be pushing 70 by now. Honestly, hope they don't retcon that like they did with Homer. Him being a 90s kid just feels cursed beyond belief.
So I'm sure you're allowed to eat ice cream and pizza for every meal.
You know it.
While they might be hesitant to completely move the entire show forward in the future, it'd be a pretty interesting move to devote one season to experimenting and aging everyone up a tad. Meg already has the vibes of someone who's discovering themselves at college, so it's probably a good time to finally let her move on from high school permanently. That'd probably be the most obvious change the show could make, but Birdbrain brings up some other interesting ideas too. Peter and Lois getting a divorce would be a big change, but at least it would lead to some more long-term storytelling options. Maybe they both try dating other people, maybe one of them tries to win the other back. There are a lot of ways it could go. Maybe frame it in a way that they're both so terrible that being together is the only way to isolate their craziness from infecting the rest of the world. It would honestly make sense if their relationship were less about love and more about a moral duty to the betterment of the world. Brian having another long-term girlfriend would definitely be welcome as well. The Jillian saga was a lot of fun for a time, and even marrying Jess was a brief but nice mix-up to the status quo. It's also proof that the show can handle overlapping stories, so why not commit and try something new for a change?
Who is that fellow? He looks so familiar. It's Meg. She had changed right after college.
But then it's a question of how long to do this. Making it last a whole season before reverting is actually a good idea. That way the show could gauge how fans react to the changes and if they'd be worth keeping around. You never know, people might absolutely hate the idea of Stewie being 2 years old. Fandoms have been a lot more unreasonable for a lot less. The show's already pretty addicted to what-if scenarios anyway, so why not go hard and switch up the status quo, at least for a little while? We're all for it. Ryan Conlon says Peter's a better parent than Lois in the later seasons. We don't exactly know if we can agree with this one, but we do see where you're coming from. Lois has gone through quite the change over the years, where she's become more erratic, more impulsive, and kinda more mean. If anything, Peter seemed to soften a bit and isn't really the resentful, psychotic character he used to be. That being said, what kind of parenting is Peter actually doing? When it comes to stepping up to a loving and caring role, we still think Lois has Peter beat.
Here we go.
Rupert, get back here!
More often than not, when the kids have a problem, they come to Lois for advice. I'm pretty sure Peter forgets those kids are his and just assumes they're 3 tenants renting out the house too. That's not to say Peter hasn't stepped up and been a good parent to the kids in the past, but if we really have to choose between which one of these two fits the title of parent the best, we would probably have to go with Lois. Just because Lois has gotten a lot worse does not mean Peter has gotten a whole lot better. That ship they call a family is only sinking faster now, and it's not like Peter's helping fill the holes in the deck. Will Hanlon74 says season 19 is a top 5 Family Guy season. Now that's a bold take. Judging by the ratings for these episodes, you might be the odd one out on this sentiment. But let's take a look at both sides, the good and the bad, to see if you may be onto something. So what's pretty good about season 19? Well, there are some pretty decent episodes to pull from here. Episodes like Stewie's First Word, The Talented Mr. Stewie, Customer of the Week, and P Terminator are all pretty solid in their own right. Good enough to propel this season to top 5 status? We're not so sure about that.
I tried.
Mommy!
There are a few episodes here that we would consider duds, however. Episodes like Pawtucket Pat, Boy's Best Friend, and Then There's Fraud, and Tales of Former Sports Glory are all kind of forgettable, not really bringing the best laughs or concepts across the board. But to your credit, we don't think it would be accurate to call this an outright bad season either. Looking at all 20 episodes this season offers, we'd reckon they're certainly more good than bad, but we just don't know if we think they're good enough to be top 5 material.
Chris, give us the ibuprofen and text the driver to pick us up here. I don't know how to do it.
After all, it's up against seasons 1 through 10, which many consider the show's absolute golden years. A lot of those episodes are iconic, not just for the show, but for the landscape of adult animation. We're not sure if there's an episode in season 19 that really strikes the same chord as some of those earlier seasons. With that being said, all of this is subjective. Despite having over 100 videos on the matter, we are not the be-all end-all on Family Guy opinions. There's no right answer to this take because it really just comes down to what you prefer at the end of the day. A lot of people have said the show gets progressively worse as time goes on, but there's still plenty of solid episodes in those later seasons, and season 19 is home to quite a few. So while we may not necessarily agree, it doesn't make this take wrong by any means. Smole Ted 926 says Dr. Hartman is a competent doctor. I'm sorry, Dr. Elmer Hartman? We're talking about the same doctor, right? I mean, we'll give the guy credit that he knows a good bit about a wide array of medical practices, from reassignment surgery to plastic surgery, but competent is probably being a little too generous. Sure, Hartman starts out as a pretty solid doctor in the earlier seasons, but it soon becomes a running gag of the series that he doesn't entirely know what he's doing. To say all of his surgeries have been successful means you'd have to be omitting quite a few instances. Remember when he completely paralyzed Joe by dropping his cell phone into him while performing back surgery? Or when Lois became blind after having LASIK eye surgery performed on her?
Now I am blind. How did this happen?
Okay, look, this isn't my fault. It was take your cat to work day.
Yeah, good luck explaining that to the insurance companies. Dr. Hartman at best is kind of like the broken clock analogy. He has the capacity to be competent at times, but it doesn't exactly define his character because his missteps outweigh the good by a mile most of the time. It's even stated in one episode that he's the worst rated doctor in the entire hospital, which is understandable considering all the fumbles and misguided choices he's made over the years. Maybe he only looks good because there are no other doctors around to compare him to. The one time that did happen, it was made painfully clear that a monkey in a lab coat may be just as useful as him.
Clear.
No, you do stuff up here. Clear!
We'd concede that maybe he should be one of the richer people in the show because he's the one guy everyone seems to go to, but we'd have to assume all that money probably goes towards the numerous medical lawsuits he's no doubt been wrapped up in. So I guess we could say you're not 100% wrong, but to say all of his surgeries have been a success is just not accurate to the characterization of Dr. Hartman, I'm sorry. Ember Has the Other Foot says, Family Guy writers hate the show. We've seen this take before for this show and a lot of other long-running shows, and to say that the people working on it outright hate it doesn't sound like the most accurate take on where Family Guy is now. Sure, we'll concede that the show isn't exactly in its heyday. A Mayday might be the more accurate way to describe the quality the show has had for the past few seasons. But we don't think this really comes down to the writers hating the show and intentionally trying to kill it. If that were the case, we honestly think the show would have gotten a lot crazier over the years. Think about it. If you didn't care about the quality of the show, wouldn't you just start throwing the wildest stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks? Who's gonna stop you? They're already locked in for 4 more seasons, so why not just get wild with it?
Would it kill us to just once tell a joke that brings glory to God?
But I guess the other way you could go about it is that the writers do want the show to be canceled, so they're just coasting and putting in minimal effort. Again, we could see how someone would think this, but we don't really find this to be the case. We think it's just a mixture of the writing room changing every so often and the fact that the show's been on for a long time. The show's had over 50 people who have been credited as writers for the show, so obviously the comedy's gonna come from differing senses of humor depending on who's at the table for a particular episode. If you think the show isn't as funny as it used to be, that could just come down to a difference in what you find funny and what the writers find funny. Take it from us, trying to be funny is hard.
I read this piece of garbage script. It's only 1 page. That's never gonna cut it.
That's just the cover.
But your perceived staleness of the show could definitely come from how long the show's been on the air. It's very possible that fresh ideas are becoming slim with these characters and interactions, and the team is still finding a way to present new ideas to a show that's been on the air for 25 years. Also, if they hate it so much, why not just quit? They probably enjoy having a paycheck every 2 weeks, so sabotaging your income doesn't sound all that smart. We think it's fair to critique the show all you want, but to assume that they're intentionally making the show bad in order to get it canceled just doesn't sound realistic. Talk to anyone trying to work in the entertainment industry right now and you'll learn what a hellscape it's become. You better strap yourself to that job like it's a dog that'll run away at any given moment. Some of y'all, like Sun Chaco and Cannibal Cats, say that there should be more Meg-centric episodes. Hard agree here. As we've already discussed, Meg has really become one of the most fun and interesting characters in the main roster. She's got a good head on her shoulders for the most part, but she's also wild and crazy with even a little tinge of darkness hidden beneath it all. She's kind of like an untapped well. There's so much potential and stuff to pull from her. I don't need to see how that well gets tapped though. I'll just use my imagination. But episodes like From Russia with Love and its companion episode Adult Education have shown that Meg is quite versatile and can be thrown into a bunch of different scenarios. Don't think that means she needs a spin-off. Not everyone can be out there spinning off. But some more Meg episodes definitely wouldn't be unwanted, and I'd be excited to see what else the show can do with her.
Yes, that's right. It was a Meg story.
Randy295 says the characters need to be more likable and less flanderized. So if you don't know what flanderization is, it's essentially when a character has a particular character trait inflated to more prominent proportions, kind of becoming the defining trait of that character. Ned Flanders never did recover after having an entire trope named after him. It's an issue a lot of people have taken with the show for years now, as well as Family Guy's tendency to lean into meaner, more sadistic comedy. So we kinda agree with this Randy here, although I will say a lot of the characters have made strides in the last few seasons to become more fleshed out.
Why are you so negative all the time?
Characters like Lois, Meg, and Chris have gotten a lot more opportunities to show more likable sides to them, while still maintaining a bit of the insanity the show's known for. The show could definitely lean back into some of their older hobbies, like Lois with her piano and Chris with his painting. That way they feel more like people and characters to get behind rather than just walking caricatures. I mean, yeah, they're cartoons, but there's gotta be something that shows that they're at least trying to be humans. But relying on simple, expected character archetypes does lead the show down the road of going for the lowest hanging fruit imaginable, so reeling back that excessive characterization could do wonders for the show's writing and humor as well.
Brian, I'm one. Still?
They don't need to go too crazy with it. Family Guy without the violence and crudeness is like a plain piece of toast. It's what gave the show the irreverence it's known for, but we believe there's a happy middle ground that can be found that can appease everybody. Tony Eel says Brian should have stayed dead longer. Theoretically, we agree with this. His death was treated like a big deal, and there could have been much more lasting ramifications from his death. Hate to say it, but the brevity of his death kinda just makes it look more and more like a marketing stunt rather than an actual meaningful story move. Probably too hard for a billion-dollar show to accomplish, right? But it's true that the show could have stretched this saga out for the majority of the season, slowly building back to his return to make it all the more emotionally resonating. But as we said, that didn't really seem to be the intention from the get-go, so it makes sense why his death was kept so brief.
It's our first Christmas without him, and no one's even mentioned his name.
Tasha Trumbull 6800 says Vinnie is better than Brian. Alright, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. In truth, we've seen this opinion a lot, and we understand to an extent. Brian was becoming a much more annoying, egotistical character, and I think fans were missing back when he was more the sophisticated voice of reason. So Vinnie definitely felt somewhat fresh, what with his heavy Italian accent and mannerisms. Maybe all Brian needed was a new accent. It seemed to work out for him well in that one episode.
This guy gonna haunt that chick real good tonight, man, I'll tell you that!
Don't get me wrong, we like Vinnie, but he also seemed kinda one note. The joke was that he was Italian, and we didn't really get too much more from him than that. Granted, he was only in about 3 episodes, so he wasn't given a ton of time to show his full potential. That being said, based on everything we did see, I don't know if we can share the same sentiment as Tasha here. Yeah, Brian's a narcissistic, hypocritical, faux intellectual poser. I had a compliment in there somewhere. He's all of those things, but we think it still makes him fun to watch because the show's usually dunking on him and his idiocy in most episodes. The love for Vinnie definitely makes sense, but unfortunately we didn't get enough of him to really say if he'd have been better than Brian in the long run. Adrian D13 says Sweaty Clam is the best YouTuber of all time. You know, many people have been saying this. We've been pulling in incredible numbers. Numbers you wouldn't even expect. Numbers that haven't even been invented yet. In all seriousness, it really does warm the heart whenever we see a comment saying that Sweaty Clam is their favorite channel. There are a lot of alternatives and other content creators on YouTube, especially in the animation niche and especially in the Family Guy niche, so truly a huge thank you to you guys for sticking with us and continuing to watch. We hope you'll stick around and help us grow until this turns from a hot take into a no-duh take. Delar123 says modern Family Guy is more entertaining than old Family Guy. This is a bit of a broad one that can be delved into much deeper, but if we were to be black and white about it, we would have to say we disagree. Of course, it's all up to personal taste, but when looking at the first half of Family Guy and the latter half, we still feel pretty partial to the older seasons. And this isn't just us being new thing bad, old man yelling at cloud with this take either. It's easy to say that we're looking at the past with rose-tinted glasses, but we've got our reasons for why we think the older seasons are the best ones.
Aha! For no reason, I'm going to fire this cannon all over your store!
For one, we think the writing is a lot tighter and revolves around making actual jokes and humorous setups. Newer Family Guy sometimes feels like we already know what the joke is, and the show has to explain that it's a joke kinda smugly. The cutaways back then also felt a lot more outlandish, even the more nonsensical ones. Though we think it makes sense why they prefer the humor of the newer seasons. The references in cutaways are probably a lot more topical and recognizable than the ones from the earlier seasons, which required some knowledge of many prior decades. Didn't stop it from being funny, however. Sometimes the joke is just so good that you don't have to know who Benjamin Disraeli is.
You don't even know who I am.
Even the animation of the older seasons can be a lot better. These newer seasons definitely have a bigger budget and can do grander set pieces, but if we're just talking about the moment-to-moment animation, we still think the older seasons have the newer ones beat. What's been up with the kind of choppy, stilted animation in recent years? Back in my day, animation was fluid and felt way more alive. Oh god, I am becoming the old man yelling at the cloud, aren't I? I'll to each their own. We think there's something to like from each era of Family Guy, and some things may be done better than others, but if we just look at new and old as a whole, yeah, we're taking the old. M. Panini says Stewie is Enceinte is overblown. Yeah, so we're a bit mixed on this. True, the concept of Stewie being pregnant and Stewie is Enceinte is actually pretty funny and leads to a lot of comedic moments that come from it. Is it weird? Yeah. Is it kinda gross? Uh-huh. Is it shocking and disgusting? Well, kinda. If we were to apply real-world rules and views to this episode, then sure, a baby getting pregnant with dog DNA is pretty disgusting. But this is a cartoon after all, where the craziest and oddest things can happen because they exist outside the realm of reality and physics.
I think it's coming out of my mouth! There's more! They're coming out of everywhere!
That doesn't make what this episode descends into any less gross or disturbing. Stewie grossly giving birth to a ton of mutant babies that quickly die off isn't the most palatable episode progression, so it's totally understandable why some people tend to write off that episode as a whole. Pretty sure that long name gag in Con Air was enough to make that episode universally hated. And it's that latter chunk of Stewie is Enceinte that just doesn't make it worth it for some viewers. The gross outcome apparently just isn't funny enough to justify watching the whole episode. The other scenes mentioned are no strangers to their detractors either, with these scenes catching plenty of flack over the years. Everyone has their own limits for what they consider too far, and while we don't necessarily think Stewie is Enceinte is the darkest or most disturbing thing the show has done, it's still not hard to see why so many people had a problem with it. JBTV Official says the Cleveland show is overhated. We would tend to agree. For a lot of people, their only exposure to the show was just Family Guy dunking on it multiple times after Cleveland returned to Quahog. A 4-season run isn't actually all that bad. Inside Job can't say that. The Drinky Crow Show can't say that. Lucy the Daughter of the Devil can't say that. That last one might be a fake show, I'm not 100%. But was the Cleveland show as good as Family Guy? Probably not, especially considering the show was mostly riding high while Cleveland's spinoff was on the air. But despite the characters and the art style, the show wasn't entirely just trying to be a Family Guy clone. It had its own thing going with its own sense of humor and style of storytelling. It felt different enough where it was honestly a welcome break from the formula we'd grown to expect from Family Guy, much like what American Dad did when it first premiered. Looking back, there are some pretty solid episodes, particularly with their holiday episodes and even their Die Hard parody. While we don't think it's the greatest of shows, it certainly doesn't deserve all the hate, and you might just be surprised by how much you like it if you give it a chance. Cleveland is begging you. I'm pretty sure he still gets royalty checks.
I used to have my own show.
LXRD Rain, or Lord Rain maybe? I don't know, let me know in the comments, says that Herbert is a top 5 character. Well, top 5 side characters maybe. Yeah, Herbert is pretty fun in small doses, especially during the earlier seasons. He still finds ways to pop up every now and then, but we won't lie, the joke of him has kinda run its course, and occasionally manages to be funny, but sometimes it just feels like the show is retreading trampled ground. This could honestly explain why he doesn't appear super frequently anymore. What more is there to really do with him? It's not even that he could be seen as offensive. We've laughed plenty at the Predator, which isn't a great thing to say out loud. The saving grace of the character is definitely Mike Henry's vocal performance. They honestly should let him sing more, it always gives us a tickle. So while we're never disappointed or annoyed to see Herbert pop up in Family Guy, we think he's lost a bit of the shock humor that made him iconic back in his earlier appearances. His dog Jessie though? 10 out of 10 character. Eric Sox09 says Peter being Gossip Girl is one of the most shocking revelations in Family Guy history. They're of course referencing the mind-blowing reveal in season 11's No Country Club for Old Men. For those of you who didn't grow up in the late 2000s or don't have a sister, Gossip Girl was a show about a bunch of rich kids whining and moaning about how being rich doesn't solve all their problems. Give me a mill and I think about 99% of my problems would go away. Just saying. Anyway, the show revolved around the mysterious titular Gossip Girl who would mass email the latest scandal around town to all the young adults in New York. And who would have thought it was Peter all along? Really, who could have guessed that? What does a Rhode Island man in a dress know about New York gossip? Either way, let me tell you, it's 100% better than who they actually revealed to be Gossip Girl.
It's me. I'm Gossip Girl.
Okay, a couple of y'all say that Peter is the smartest person in the Griffin family. Huh? I mean, if everyone in the family but him died, we might be able to agree with you, but we'd reckon that some of those corpses would still have higher brain activity than Peter. Maybe it really comes down to what you consider smart. Peter isn't all that book smart, yet he still manages to achieve a lot despite that. He's traveled the world, acquired a crazy assortment of vehicles, and held a multitude of jobs across the 25 years we've known him. But that doesn't smell like smart to us. It smells like a heaping, steaming pile of luck. Sure, he's had his moments of brilliance, but once again, a broken clock is right twice a day. To say he's the smartest one out of a family that has a time machine building baby just doesn't sound all that right. Maybe he's just so smart that he actually appears dumb to us who aren't on his level.
Well, Lois, since you asked, I find this meatloaf rather shallow and pedantic.
Cloudsnap says that cutaway gags are secretly the smartest storytelling tool. We'd have to agree with you here. Cutaways have been the show's bread and butter for years and will become the calling card for the show's humor. Not sure how to end this scene? Cut to some nonsense that only somewhat ties into what was just happening. Rinse and repeat for 25 years and rake in billions of dollars. The show's caught a lot of flack for its cutaways in the past, and we definitely understand where people are coming from. Sometimes it does feel like a cheap out, especially with those long cutaways. Did the show really need a 2-minute music video breakaway from the story and then there's fraud? Probably not, but I bet you the absurdity of it did tickle someone.
We'll be right back.
But there might be some truth to the cutaways and how they've played into the longevity of the show. It pretty much gives the writers a near infinite resource to build jokes off of. It doesn't matter if it doesn't directly pertain to the plot. All it takes is remember the time, or this is worse than, to connect the most random non sequitur to the story. Now that we're talking about it, we have noticed that the newer-ish episodes of Family Guy have been quite light on cutaways, especially as transitions between scenes. Some scenes nowadays just end pretty flatly, and there's a noticeable gap in the show that cutaways used to fill. We guess we can be happy the show isn't leaning on them as much as they used to, but we'd be lying if we said we didn't kind of miss the rapid-fire nature the show used to have with them. Hey, it's Vamp says without cancellations, Family Guy wouldn't have been as popular. An interesting hypothesis, though not one we think we could entirely agree with. It's true that Family Guy went through a huge boom in the mid-2000s because everyone was stricken with the age-old adage, you don't know what you got till it's gone. The cancellations led to it being highly demanded by many based on the DVD sales and the ratings of reruns on Adult Swim, so it's fair to say Family Guy gained a whole new level of popularity because people were demanding more.
Is there no hope?
Well, I suppose if all those shows go down the tubes, we might have a shot.
Then again, if it wasn't canceled, wouldn't that just mean it was already super popular? The show was canceled for low ratings, so if the show had actually performed well in its first 3 seasons, wouldn't you assume that it would have achieved a certain level of popularity? Though you do have to wonder about the ripple effect that would have caused. Without a cancellation, Seth MacFarlane may have never gotten a chip on his shoulder that made him push the show farther down the line of crudeness. Heck, if Family Guy was never canceled, American Dad may have never come into existence. Hate to say it, but thank God the show was canceled. It's hard to really say for sure what would have happened with the show, but it's impossible to deny how much of its status as a cult classic paved the way for the show to grow into what it is today. JackGamer47 says You Can't Handle the Booth is actually a good, funny episode. To set the stage, this is the most disliked Family Guy episode in history if we go by IMDb ratings. People hated this thing, mostly for its concept, which involved the characters narrating over an episode no one had even seen, which made things confusing for some trying to follow both parallel plots at the same time. But we can agree that this episode is definitely underrated. Chris screaming about his water bottle, Lois ragging on Peter for a needless musical number, Sarah Paulson awkwardly trying to get a word in. There's some actual good comedy in this episode.
This is why we need a Sharpie in here to put our names on our water!
Plus, the entire concept of the episode is right up Family Guy's alley. They're all about being meta and pulling back the curtain in interesting ways, and we think as a concept, this pretty much fits with the show's MO. Also, whether we like to admit to it or not, the show actually seems to like making its fans mad. Making this an episode within an episode that makes it difficult to understand what's happening in either plot is one big middle finger to the people who aren't down for Family Guy's typical time wasting. Now, whether or not this subversion actually succeeds at being funny is completely up to the individual viewer, but we honestly do appreciate the nerve the show had to make something like this. It might not be the funniest of episodes, but we could totally understand watching this one over some of the other duds in the show's run. Like the episode all about reverse mortgages. My Pillow's making a more compelling argument for my attention than that episode.
Reverse mortgages are a total scam.
Bling Meme Master says Sneakers O'Toole should have taken his sneakers off. Alright, listen here, psycho. You think this is a joke? Some kind of game? Do you see a freshly bloomed flower in a field and your first thought is to go over and stomp on it? Sneakers O'Toole can't take his sneakers off. He is Sneakers O'Toole. The very concept of wearing sneakers is emphatically ingrained in the very thread of his characterization, and you just think we should pull on that string and just unravel the whole thing? Is this some kind of sick joke? Would you rip the wings off a bird and expect it to fly? You have succumbed to the primal human desire we've all agreed to suppress. You just want to see carnage, the absolute disintegration of all things structured and orderly. Haven't we done enough? All the villages we've raised? The civilizations we've dismantled? The stories we've snuffed out without so much as a loss of sleep? But your dreams will remind you. You can run from the horrors we've allowed, but your mind will never let you truly forget. You've let the darkness take you with your back to the light, and all the lords of this world and the next wept at the very inclination that the sneaker should be taken off of Sneakers O'Toole. On second thought, he should probably take those off at some point. They probably start to smell after a while.
Hey, take those sneakers off!
No!
Bray Wilmarth says Brian and Quagmire's rivalry needs to end. We're not so sure we can entirely agree with this one. The blood feud between Quagmire and Brian has been one of the highlights of the show, with several episodes dedicated to their hatred for one another. A little bit of hate isn't a bad thing. It keeps the blood pumping, it keeps you on your toes. We totally see where you're coming from though. Brian is kind of Peter's best friend, and it seems a bit weird whenever the guys hang out and Brian isn't invited. That being said, we're not entirely sure if Brian is all that needed in that friend group. The four main guys already cover a lot of ground, with Quagmire being more of the pretentious one and Joe being the one to make bad political jokes. In short, the group has evolved past the need for a Brian.
You know what? Screw you guys!
And it seems like the show has more or less found its groove with the pairing of Brian and Stewie, and honestly, that's probably for the best. Those two have a lot more history together, and their relationship has been pretty fleshed out, so it kind of makes sense to just keep doing what the show's doing. Now, we wouldn't be opposed to more episodes that remind us of the bond between Brian and Peter, but we don't need all of the guys present to do that. Plus, Brian needs Quagmire to take him down a peg, and Quagmire needs Brian to annoy him because he honestly deserves it. Those two are yin and yang, whether they want to be or not.
Not a cat.
And that's all the hot takes we're covering for now, but if you guys happen to have more, let us know down in the comments and maybe we'll do another one of these videos later down the road. In the meantime, be sure to leave a like on this video if you had a good time, and don't forget to subscribe